Alright, so in my defense, I wanted to do this review outside with a beautiful background, but rain had different ideas, and so you're stuck in my garage, a garage that I unfortunately did not have time to clean up. Now, before I start my walk around, I'm going to go on a bit of driving so you can see past Z that's been driving around talking about the bike. And I'm going to show you not just what came with the bike, but also the upgrades I've made, because I've made quite a few changes. So now that I've owned this bike for 11,000 kilometers, 11,000 miles actually, I'm hitting 18,000 kilometers. I feel like I've used it in many different use cases to be able to do a proper in-depth review. One of the things that I find frustrating about online reviews is that people take stuff for a test drive, or they purchase an item and they'll review it basically right away, as if you can see all the goods and bads. So all they really review is the first impression and nothing else. Now, I'll talk about the bad first. So I'll start with the bad, and oh, that's a beautiful house. Wowza! Anyway, I'm back. I'll talk about the bad first because I want to get out of the way. I'll talk about the downright ugly, and then I'll talk about the good, and I'll end with whether I think I will purchase this bike again or not if I could go back in time. I'm also going to be making a lot of comparisons with Harley Davidson Road King Special because these are very similar bikes in a similar price point and target a similar market. So I think they're direct competitors. In fact, a friend of mine looked at my bike. He wanted to get this bike. He was impressed by this bike, and he ended up getting a Harley Davidson. So I'll talk about why that happened as well. So stick around till the end, watch the whole review, and put a comment below to tell me what you think. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Off we go. Now, one thing I mentioned is that I won't lie. This will be an honest review. So you'll hear a lot of negatives. You'll hear me talking about a lot of negatives, but that's only because I'm just stating everything honestly. I love this area. Now, I want to talk about what this bike is. It's an old-fashioned, old-school, air-cooled engine. It's an old-school American, massive torque, big engine, low-end torque, low RPM cruiser, touring bike, whatever. I like that. Now, I think Indian might have gotten carried away with the whole old-school thing. It's a 2021 model, and I still had to install a USB up front myself, as if no one in 2021 mounts their phone on the handlebar and charge them. What the heck? I shouldn't have had to do that. Now, unlike Harley Davidson Road King Special, which actually comes by default with all the safety features, some might call it nanny features, but whatever. You have the option to use your traction control, your linked brakes, your whatever they have. You don't have that option in Indian. You can't even pay money to get traction control, for instance. Now, personally, I actually don't care for those. I was okay with it, and I'd rather turn traction control on anyway. But it's still, it should at least be an option. I don't see why it's not something you can purchase if you choose, if you so desire. Linked brakes, on the other hand, can save your life in a panic situation one day. If you slam just your rear brake or just your front brake, and if they're linked, and you're aggressive enough, Harley Davidson would actually go ahead and apply both brakes, which is fairly neat, and it can prevent you from some disturbing situations one day. So in my opinion, that actually puts Indian at a huge disadvantage, or somewhat of a disadvantage for a segment of the market that's looking for those things. Now, speaking of standard, are we talking about the USB? Now, speaking of standard, are we talking about a missing USB, which wasn't that big a deal because I installed it. I got it from Amazon for $8 and I put it in. But it's not just the USB that's the issue. At this price point, you really should get heated grips. I shouldn't have had to buy additional grips, pay the Indian prices, throw away the perfectly good brand new grips. Same goes for the seat. In order to get heated seats that I want because I ride in cold weather, I had to buy a different seat, and now I'm stuck with two seats, which is again ridiculous business model that Indian copied from Harley Davidson, except Harley Davidson at least has the advantage of a massive aftermarket network and aftermarket support that Indian doesn't have. So what happens is that for some of the accessories, believe it or not, Indian actually charges a higher price for OEM accessories than Harley Davidson does, which is inexcusable, especially when you don't have an alternative, or you might have one or two alternatives. For a lot of accessories I got, I had to do a lot of research, I had to import them. In some cases I had to email manufacturers and have them create something for Indian, which again, you know, it works out, but I shouldn't have had to do all that. Holy traffic, Batman. That happens when something happens on the highway and people take interior roads as a bypass. So something must have been happening with the 401. Oh my goodness, look at the traffic. This is my chill riding route where there's never any traffic. That's why I come in right here. But I guess when the highway is blocked, the highway is blocked. What can you do? Now talking about accessories, when you get the Indian Springfield, which is much cheaper than this bike, you get windshield, you get highway bars. When you upgrade it to this more expensive option, granted you do get a bigger engine and you get this blacked out look, you no longer get the windshield. Now you gotta pay more money to get the windshield. You don't get highway bars, even though on a touring bike almost everyone will put a highway bars on front and rear, but you don't get those. Indian used to have an oil cooler on this bike. They don't anymore. They decided to get rid of it. Why? Who knows? That's an upgrade now. We talked about aftermarket options. If you were getting Harley Davidson, you have different styles of windshield. You have different curvatures. You have wind guards. You have vents built in windshield. Indian, nope, don't have those options. I had to get the manufacturer to cut this windshield that I have, and then I had to get an old gold wing vent that didn't properly fit because the curvature was different. And then I had to get different kind of screws to kind of just hold it together. Now I made it work, but I shouldn't have had to. If Indian is going to follow the Harley Davidson model of giving you what they call a blank canvas that you can make your own, they're going to have to improve their aftermarket accessory option, and they really have to work on the price, because some of their prices are absolutely unbelievably ridiculous. There is something to be said when even Harley Davidson is a cheaper option. The Road King Special is actually cheaper than this bike, includes more standard options than this bike, and aftermarket accessories are cheaper than this bike. That's highway robbery. That's really uncalled for. Guess what Indian charges for a tour pack for this bike? $1,000, $1,500, $2,000, $5,000 Canadian dollars. How is that okay? How is that okay to charge $5,000 plus tax for a tour pack? That's ridiculous. I bought an aftermarket quick release, an aftermarket tour pack put all together for what, probably $500. It's not the same quality as the Indian. It's not the same size as the Indian, but guess what? It's 10% of the price, so take that, Indian. And it's much lighter, so it's easy for me to take out and store. Another complaint, who the heck designed this instrumental panel? They're copying, they're, I guess not copying, let's say they're taking inspiration from Harley Davidson. But even Harley Davidson is mounted higher up in the tank. It's mounted so low that with the full face helmet, I can't see how fast I'm going unless I physically move my head down and take my eyes away from the road. It should be mounted where my GPS is mounted. I actually use my GPS as my speedometer all the time. It's more accurate anyway. So that's a weird thing. I mean, I would totally redesign that. Speaking of a fuel gauge location, the fuel gauge is insanely inaccurate. I've had it complain about running out of fuel. I've gone another 50 kilometers after the light is blinking wildly. Even after you dismiss it, it switches back to blinking low fuel. You dismiss it, it switches back to blinking no fuel. You go to the gas station. What's the tank capacity? In theory, 5.5 gallons. It only takes 4.5 gallons. Meaning either Indians lying about the fuel capacity, and I don't think they are, or there was another gallon of fuel capacity left. As a result, even after I push it with my riding style, I go about 300 kilometers on a full gas tank when other people are riding with on Road King Special, who are riding the exact same way as I am because we're riding together in a group. They can go 400 plus. And so I'm generally the rider who has to say, hey guys, we gotta stop for gas. Now I get it. Generally, you will stop a few times before riding 300 kilometers, but those stops don't have to be gas station stops. There could be a scenic spot, there could be a food place, there could be a coffee place. But now others have to stop at a gas station spot just because of me, because others I ride with have BMW GSA, Goldwing, and a couple of Road King specials. And I find it, frankly, I find it annoying. It shouldn't be so annoying, but it is. It really frustrates me. And I don't like it. I really don't like it. Indians should have done better. But this bike has adjustable monoshock, which is much better than Harley Davidson Road King Special, and that's one of the reasons why I got this bike over the Road King Special, because I switch back and forth between Two Up and myself. I throw in a tour pack, take my wife, I take out the tour pack. Sometimes I load it a lot, especially if my wife and I are going away for a weekend on the bike. And I like quick adjustability. So Indian gave us air shocks. They gave us the ability to adjust them, but it's manual adjustment on this expensive bike. You have a pump that you have to pump it in. But that would still be okay if it was accessible, but you gotta remove a piece of plastic. That's a pain to put back on if you have a wider aftermarket seat. Why couldn't I have just a button control like GSA or Goldwing, or at least put it accessible? I had to buy a couple of things from Amazon to make it accessible. I shouldn't have had to do that, Indian. What the hell, man? What the hell? Now, in terms of design, I really like the design. I find this bike absolutely drop-dead gorgeous. Harley Road King Special is also a beautiful bike, but it's a lot more common, especially since Road King Special has the same design as Street Glide and Road Glide. You see that silhouette and that back everywhere. I like it much better that this bike is much more unique. When we pull over, typically you have a sea of Harleys. In my riding group, there are multiple Harleys, but there's only one of these. I like it. I like being somewhat unique. Speaking of unique, something else that I care about, which is kind of silly, most people don't care about that, I get it, I'm weird, is the gear sensor on this bike is a real gear sensor. Even if you pull the clutch, you still see what gear you're on. It's pretty awesome. On the Harley, I think it goes by the RPM and it calculates it, so when you pull the clutch or when you're changing gear, whatever, there are times where it doesn't give you the accurate reading or it doesn't give you any reading at all until you ride the bike. I like the fact that I always know which gear I'm on. Now, I would have used it more if the instrumental panel was in a good location, but even at the location it's in, blurring. Alrighty, back to the vlog. Even at the location the fuel gauge is in, sometimes when you're slowing down, whatever, I just want to know what gear I'm in. I don't know why I use it. I like it, whatever. It's a plus one for me. The sound is great. I do have the Indian Stage 1 upgrade, but I didn't want something too loud because my old bike was too loud. But look, check it out. We're riding, I'm accelerating, I'm slowing down. My microphone is actually outside my jacket. It's picking up the wind noise, it's picking up the engine sound from the bike, and you can still hear me talk. That's actually quite amazing. But it's a nice, deep, throaty sound. If I rev it, it's a great sound. When I accelerate, it really wakes up, and it's pretty awesome. Let's go with the street so I can show you. So I'm going to accelerate a bit, and you can see it. 3, 2, 1, go. Hear it, that rumble? The camera doesn't capture it that well. I've tried it before, but it's a good sound. Just take my word. I get compliments everywhere I go. I like the fact that it's not too loud. People who like really loud sounds, they might not like it, but I'm too old for that. The brakes are also great, and that's one of the upgrades over Harley Davidson Road King Special. In my mind, it's a big difference when I rode it. I don't think Harley is lacking in any way. I think it's perfectly safe. In fact, with all the safety features, it's probably safer than this bike, but I prefer the brakes on this bike. I've had to slam the brakes on a few occasions. I've had to stop in a hurry, and the ABS plus the brakes handle really well. This massive bike, even when I'm two up with everything loaded, it stops fairly well. I like it. I want to talk about some of the upgrades and changes I've done. So let's start. I'm going to use my GoPro to walk you through the customizations. Ultimate seats, a review of these seats coming up. Watch it. Beautiful seats with one stupid feature. You got to watch the review to understand what that stupid feature is. I also installed these vents. They actually are for Goldwing. I had the manufacturer of this cut the vents for me. It wasn't big enough, but I used these like damsel tool extension that I put in my drill to make the hole a little bit bigger. Still didn't fit because the curvature is different, but I got bigger screws and kind of made it work, and it stays and is fine. I changed the French lights to driving lights, as well as that's adaptive, leaning, whatever, LED fancy lights. Now you can see these lights are driving lights. They're super bright. Something else they do is, check it out, they act as turn signals as well as back here, the custom dynamic turn signals. Beautiful stuff. And brake lights and normal driving lights. They add a lot of visibility, especially at night. I got heated grips installed. I have this wrap around it as well, which looks quite nice with the Indian thing in it. Heated seats, stage 1 and stage 2 updates. I have these ball mounts everywhere. Highway bars, Kuryakin highway peg. These Kuryakin floorboard insert things, as well as these things, I change them everywhere. Also have the quick shifter installed. If you look in here, you'll see some of the wires that I'm going to cover in black so they don't stand out, but for now I've just left it as is. Floorboard for the passenger instead of floor pegs. I have ball mounts everywhere, 2 over there, 1 over here, 1 on the other side on the highway bar, 1 on this side that you saw where the cup holder is. The vent that I showed you, as well as the Garmin Zumo XT, which is hardwired, so when I turn the bike on, that baby just turns on. When I turn the bike off, that thing just turns off. Well, it turns off in a few seconds. The 16-inch ape bars are quite awesome. Now, let me talk about some of the stuff I don't like that I wasn't able to mention while I was riding the bike. When I'm sitting on the bike, I don't see this if I'm sitting outside, which means if I'm wearing my full face helmet, which is what I do most of the times when I'm riding, I need to look down to be able to see my speed, especially to read this part, which is really stupid design. On the copying, I mean, maybe taking inspiration from Harley Davidson, but Harley Davidson has this thing a little bit higher up. This thing should have it higher up as well. In fact, it should just be where the GPS is, and I typically rely on my GPS for all the speeds and everything else. Now, you're riding, you're throttling, you want to set cruise control, and you have to hold and control the throttle, get in there, and set the cruise control. I have long fingers, I have big hand, I have long thumb. It works for me. Smaller thumb, it would be kind of tricky. And it did take me some time to figure out why is cruise control not on the other side, which would make logical sense when you could control the throttle with your right hand side, set the cruise on the left side. And most bikes actually have them on the left side. On the flip side, the turn signals are on the same side, unlike Harley Davidson, which puts right on the right, left on the right, which is kind of dumb. The engine heat is not that bad at all. Not as bad as I thought it would be. But I live in Canada, it's cool most of the times. Rear cylinder can deactivate and turn off, but if you're stuck in traffic for a while, or if you're not stopped completely, but you're moving slowly, constantly, then this area does get hot. Now, I do wear riding jeans most of the times I ride, so not a big deal for me. It might be a big deal for you, especially if you wear shorts and don't wear riding jeans, but it's fine the way it is. I don't know if you can see this or not because it's kind of dark on this side, but I had to extend my air thing. This has no air compressor, but for air shock, so I can adjust it here without taking this plastic panel off, which with the floorboard and this big seats is kind of a pain to put on. I shouldn't have had to do that. Indian should have had it. I also installed this I also installed this heel shifter. I first had Indian heel shifter, which actually came up here and took room away from floorboard, so I got the Kuryakin one. But on a bike this expensive, on a touring bike, I shouldn't have had to worry about it. It should have come with a heel shifter by default. I had to add that light myself. I shouldn't have had to do that. It's an Indian thing. It should always have been lit. An Indian's argument why it wasn't lit because a fender is whatever. Look, man, I did it. Took me no time. Indian could have figured it out. They should have figured it out. The gas tank is 5.5 gallon, but when the gas light comes on and you can ride for another 50, 60 kilometers, it will still only take 4.5 gallons. So I don't know if the gas tank measurement is wrong or if it still has a gallon of tanks. I don't know. But for all practical purposes, the gas tank really acts like a 4.5 gallon gas tank, which really pisses me off because that's kind of small for this massive a bike. And that's really it. That's really all the complaints and negatives I have, which isn't a lot, which is why I love this bike very, very much. Now, my wish list, if Indians listening, here's what I would like to do in the future. Number one, it used to have an oil cooler added back on because it does make a difference. It makes the engine run cooler. Any issue with that oil cooler? Nope. Perfectly fine. With the oil cooler, a little bit better. They should have it. Figure out your fuel capacity. If it's 5.5 gallon and when I'm totally empty, I should be close to 5.5 gallon in, not 4.5 gallon. I don't know what's going on. Fix it. Air suspensions are great. Put it on a compressor. Put a button up there so I can control the rear suspension using the button instead of using a pump like it's 1920s. Move the cruise control to the left. It doesn't make sense on the right. Move it to the left. This bike used to come with driving lights. Add the driving lights back. Make sure they're smoked. No need to have, yellow things up here, which is silly. I had to get rid of them. No need to have non-smoke rear brakes. They should be smoked. So make everything smoked. Make sure the wall bonnet is lit. It should have been lit all along. It should never have been left dark. Should be lit. Put heated seats on by default and put touring seats on by default. And that's really it. That's all they need to do to make this bike absolutely perfect. It's near perfect as it is. Now, I really like the matte finish, no nonsense look on this bike. I know matte finish is not for everyone. Some people like it glossy. I prefer this black dot matte look. I think chrome, I'm not going to say it's all, I might buy a bike with chrome in the future. I might buy a bike with glossy finish in the future, but I find this to be more unique and just suits my personality a lot better. I also really like how this bike stands out in the crowd because, like I said, typically it's the only Indian, but also in terms of design language and the kind of design they use, its design language is really cool. There's a lot of attention to detail happening on this bike that I find that other bikes don't have. I actually sometimes just open my garage door and just look at this bike like a 13-year-old checking out her first crush. That's what I am with this bike. Absolutely love it. On days where things are stressful, like today, I just go out and go for a ride. And it takes all the stress away. Now, to be fair, that would happen on absolutely any bike, but this one is just special. I have a special connection with this bike, and that's the one thing I want to talk to you about with bikes. A lot of people misunderstand what motorcycles are. They argue about subjectively what's better and what's worse. And that's a really weird thing to talk about because motorcycles are not. Now I want to talk about something else as well. A lot of times people argue about motorcycles and which one has better spec than others and which ones are better value, whatever. Motorcycles are not a sound financial purchase. I can't say that enough. If you want to make a good financial decision, go buy yourself a Honda Civic. It will give you everything you need. It's reliable. It will last you forever. And it probably has better fuel economy than this monster, to be honest. Motorcycles are an emotional purchase. You gotta go sit on one. You gotta check it out. You gotta imagine yourself next to one. You gotta ride one. And when you do that, you'll find that one bike just sings to you. That is your bike. It speaks to you. It speaks to your heart. And this is the bike that does that for me. Honestly, no bike sings to me the way this one does. So, despite all the shortcomings I mentioned, despite the fact that this bike costs me more than a Road King Special would have to purchase and to personalize, despite the fact that this bike has annoyingly thin paint, especially in this price range. Even when Harley does something better, Indian, you know you're doing it wrong. The paint is very thin, it comes out when you look at it. I still love this bike, and if I could go back in time, I would buy this bike on the exact same color any time of the day, and there's nothing I would change. Absolutely nothing. This is the perfect bike for me, and if you're in the market for a nice, massive touring bike, and you don't want fairing, you want a bike that's open to the road, you want to be able to put on the windshield, you want to be able to take it out, you want to be able to throw on a tour pack, you want to be able to take it out. Do consider this bike. It sounds amazing, the rumble, the vibration, the feel. This bike is a dream. It makes me feel like a 13-year-old giggling all the way. That was totally unnecessary, but that was also a lot of fun. So, whatever, sue me.